A millionaire tries to trick a young woman into selling her farm, but when he discovers her secret, he is shocked. Before we dive into the story, comment below which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Nathan Montgomery owned the luxurious Blue Horizon Resort. That day, Nathan was in his office, gazing at the resort view through the window, deep in thought. He wanted to expand his resort. However, one thing bothered him: a small, run-down farm adjacent to his property. David, his assistant, rushed in, placing a folder on the desk. "Mr. Montgomery," she refused again, he announced. Nathan turned around, coldly. "Again?" His voice was sharp. "Emily Parker doesn't want to sell, sir. She said no amount of money in the world would change her mind. That girl doesn't understand what she's doing. We've offered her enough money to buy a mansion," Nathan exclaimed. "It seems she's tied to her parents' memory," David explained. "And then there's her sister, Sophie, who has a rare illness and loves that place." "If money doesn't work, we'll try something else," Nathan said. "Another approach?" David asked cautiously. Nathan grabbed his jacket and replied enigmatically, "I'll handle it myself." A few days later, Nathan's silver truck crept down the dirt road. He was dressed simply, worn jeans, a rolled-up blue shirt, and leather boots. The successful millionaire was gone, replaced by Nathan Miller, just another man looking for a quiet escape. Across the fence, Emily Parker looked up as the truck approached. She was sitting on the porch steps next to a bucket of freshly picked vegetables. Her face glistened with sweat, and loose strands of blonde hair escaped her simple bun. Beside her, Sophie, a little girl with brown hair and wide eyes, was flipping through an old book. "Who's that?" Sophie whispered. "I don't know," Emily replied, standing and wiping her hands on her worn apron. The truck stopped, and the man stepped out, flashing a friendly smile. He looked out of place, but not threatening. "Hello," he greeted, raising a hand. "Sorry for showing up unannounced. I'm Nathan Miller. I've been traveling through the area and—" He scratched his head, looking slightly awkward. "Well, I'm looking for a place to stay for a few days, away from the city." Emily frowned. "This isn't an inn." "I know," Nathan said, smiling again. "But I heard this place is special. I thought maybe I could help out in exchange for a place to sleep." She crossed her arms, eyeing him from head to toe. "And what does a city man know about working on a farm?" Nathan chuckled briefly, as if expecting the question. "More than you'd think. I grew up on a farm. I can plant, harvest, fix fences, and even take care of animals. I just need a quiet spot for a few days." Emily still looked hesitant, but Sophie, curious, stepped closer. "Can you really fix fences? Ours is broken out back." Nathan smiled and nodded, turning to Emily. "Let me prove it. If I'm not useful, I'll leave tomorrow." Emily hesitated. She had learned not to trust strangers, but there was something different about this man. Besides, the workload on the farm was overwhelming, and any help would be appreciated. "All right," she finally said, "but you'll stay in the old cabin by the barn. Don't expect comfort." Nathan grinned widely. "Deal." By late afternoon, Nathan was in the field, hammering at the fence. Sweat dripped from his brow as he nailed the last plank in place. Looking up, he saw Emily watching from a distance, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I warned you it wouldn't be easy," she remarked, walking closer. Nathan wiped his forehead with his sleeve and smiled. "It's a good start. Maybe I'm not as useless as you thought." She didn't reply, but a faint, involuntary smile tugged at her lips. Sophie ran over, holding a basket with 2 apples. "Here, Nathan, Emily said you earned a reward." Nathan took an apple and thanked her. "Thanks, Sophie. I needed this." He bit into it, savoring the fruit's sweetness. As he chewed, he glanced around, the trees, the simple house, and the sky turning shades of orange. For the first time in years, Nathan felt something unfamiliar, a peace he didn't know he was looking for. As night fell, Nathan sat alone in the small cabin by the barn. Inside, there was only a wooden bed and a table with a lantern. He sat on the bed's edge and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with a message from David. "Any progress?" Nathan stared at the words on his screen for a few moments before replying, "I'm working on it." He turned off his phone and leaned back, listening only to the sound of crickets and the wind outside. For the first time in a long while, he was far from luxury and corporate meetings, and for some reason, he felt less empty. Still, one question lingered in his mind. How long would it take before Emily discovered the truth? The sun was just beginning to rise when Emily Parker was awakened by the distant sound of hammering coming from the field. For a moment, she thought it was a dream, but when the sound persisted, she got up quickly. Throwing her worn jacket over her pajamas, she walked down the porch steps and headed to the barn. There he was, Nathan Miller, kneeling beside the broken fence, hammering a new board with determination. He looked focused, as though accustomed to this kind of work. Scattered around him were tools he had likely taken without asking. Emily crossed her arms and watched for a moment before approaching. "You're not wasting any time, are you?" she said with a hint of sarcasm. Nathan looked up, surprised but quickly smiled. "Good morning to you too. I thought getting an early start might improve my chances of impressing the boss." "Boss?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's news to me." "Of course, you're the owner here," Nathan said, delivering the final strike to the nail before standing. "There. Another section of fence, good as new." Emily glanced at his work. He clearly knew what he was doing. The repair was well done, something she didn't expect from an outsider. Even so, she kept her expression stern. "That doesn't mean you've earned a place here," she said, turning back toward the house. "Breakfast is almost ready. If you want to eat, wash your hands." "Yes, ma'am," Nathan replied with an amused smile as Emily walked away. Inside the kitchen, the aroma of homemade bread filled the air. Sophie sat at the table coloring a picture while Emily finished frying eggs. "Emily, is Nathan going to stay here for a long time?" the little girl asked, her eyes still on her drawing. Emily hesitated before answering. "I don't know, Sophie. He said he just wants to help. We'll see if he can handle it." Sophie smiled. "I like him. He seems nice." Emily didn't respond. Instead, she focused on the eggs while part of her mulled over her sister's words. Ever since their parents had passed, Sophie rarely trusted strangers. The fact that she already seemed to like Nathan was something Emily couldn't ignore. When Nathan entered the kitchen, his hands clean and his hair still a bit messy, Sophie was the first to greet him. "Good morning, Nathan. I made a drawing for you." "For me?" Nathan leaned down to take the paper, which showed a smiling sun above a simple house. "Wow, you've got talent. I'll keep this with me." Emily glanced over her shoulder as she served breakfast. "Food's ready. If you plan to keep working, you'll need to eat something." "Thank you, Emily," Nathan said as he sat down and grabbed a slice of bread. "This bread looks amazing. Did you make it?" "Who else would?" she replied without smiling, though Sophie giggled softly. Nathan noticed Emily wasn't the type to open up easily. Her gaze remained watchful, as if waiting for him to slip up. Nathan spent the morning helping Emily with small tasks she had been putting off for days. He organized the shed, fixed a wheel on the wheelbarrow, and pulled weeds from the garden. "Where did you learn all this?" Emily asked suddenly as the two worked side by side under the sun. "Like I said, I grew up on a farm," Nathan replied, not looking up from the soil. "My dad always said you only understand the value of things when you put your hands to work." Wise words. Emily didn't press further, but remained curious. Nathan rarely spoke about himself, and when he did, his answers seemed rehearsed. Despite that, he was efficient and didn't complain about the hard work. Across the property, Sophie played with flowers she had picked, running back and forth. For a few seconds, Nathan stopped and watched the little girl. "She looks happy." Emily followed his gaze, a soft smile briefly escaping before she could hide it. "Sophie loves this place. Our parents built it all from scratch, you know? Every tree, every fence, they gave us a home. Now it's my responsibility to take care of it." Nathan felt a pang in his chest. For a moment, he almost forgot why he was there. "Must be hard doing it all on your own," he said. Emily took a deep breath and wiped her hands on her apron. "I manage. I always have." She walked away toward the barn, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts. He knew he needed to stay focused, but with each passing moment on the farm, the plan he had carefully crafted seemed harder to follow. Night had fallen, and the sky was filled with stars, something Nathan hadn't seen in a long time. He was sitting on the cabin steps when he heard light footsteps. Turning around, he saw Sophie holding a blanket. "Are you cold?" Nathan asked. "No, I brought this for you. Emily says the nights here can get chilly," Sophie said, handing him the blanket before sitting down beside him. "Thank you, Sophie. You're very thoughtful." The little girl looked up at the stars, a faint smile on her face. My mom used to say that every star is a dream, and when you look at them, you can make a wish. Nathan gazed at the bright, endless sky. And what would you wish for, Sophie? That Emily never has to worry about anything ever again, she answered so quickly and innocently that it made Nathan's heart ache. For a moment, he glanced at the simple cabin and then at the house further away, where Emily was probably already asleep. A heavy silence settled between them. "What about you, Nathan?" Sophie asked. "What would you wish for?" Nathan didn't know how to respond. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure what he truly wanted. That night, lying on the old mattress in the cabin, Nathan stared at the wooden ceiling. Sophie's voice echoed in his mind, along with images of the farm and Emily's reserved smile. He knew he was getting more involved than he should, and that was dangerous. On the other side of the farm, Emily was still awake too. Lying in bed next to Sophie, she found herself thinking about the mysterious man who had appeared out of nowhere. Despite her distrust, she couldn't deny that Nathan had brought something new to the farm: hope. The next morning, Nathan was awakened by a soft knock on the cabin door. Blinking a few times, he sat up and ran a hand over his face. The familiar scent of damp earth and fresh grass filled the air. "Nathan?" Sophie's small, curious voice called from outside. Smiling, he got up and opened the door. There she was, barefoot and wearing a simple dress, holding a basket of flowers. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Emily says you're helping with the barn today. Is that so?" Nathan laughed, crouching to her level. "Your sister doesn't waste any time, does she? She says we have to make the most of the day." Sophie twirled one of the flowers between her fingers before extending the basket to him. "These are for you, to make your room prettier." Nathan accepted the basket, feeling a pang in his heart. There was something pure and unshakable about this child that he hadn't expected to find. "Thank you, Sophie. I'll take good care of them." "Come on, or Emily will scold you," Sophie said with a mischievous grin before running off toward the house. Nathan stood there for a moment, watching her disappear. The world seemed so simple here, so far removed from cold meetings, soulless contracts, and investors demanding every minute of his time. This is temporary, he reminded himself, but with each passing day, that truth became harder to accept. In the kitchen, Emily was already busy preparing breakfast. She turned slightly when she heard Nathan's footsteps entering through the door. "You're slower than I expected. I thought you might sneak off in the middle of the night." "I considered it, but I figured you'd hunt me down and find me." She let out a faint laugh, a rare sound that caught Nathan by surprise. Without looking directly at him, Emily placed a plate of eggs and bread on the table. "I'll need your help with the barn today. The main door is falling apart. If we can fix it, I can bring the horse back." "Horse?" Nathan raised his eyebrows. "You have a horse?" "No. Well, we used to. Old Duke, he's staying at a neighbor's farm because I can't handle everything on my own, but Sophie misses him." Nathan nodded, once again realizing how much Emily carried on her shoulders. She was young, but there was something in her eyes that made her seem much older, a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Then let's bring Duke back," he said with conviction. Emily paused for a second, surprised by the firmness in his voice. Nathan gave her a light smile and picked up the screwdriver on the table. "Let's take care of that barn." Hours later, Nathan's hands were covered in dust and sweat as he worked on the barn door while Emily held the wooden planks in place. "Hold it steady," he called out, hammering in another nail. "I am. You're the one taking forever." Emily shot back, smiling for the first time in a long while. Nathan chuckled and gave the wood one final hammer strike. Once it was firmly in place, he stepped back, satisfied. "Done. This won't budge, even in a hurricane." Emily let go of the wood and wiped her forehead, leaving a streak of dust behind. "I'll admit, you know what you're doing. It's getting harder to come up with a reason to send you away." "Oh, so that's your plan? Just waiting for me to give up?" Nathan crossed his arms, pretending to be offended. "Maybe," Emily replied, half joking, half serious. "But you're more stubborn than I thought." They stood in silence for a moment, simply observing the barn, which now looked sturdier. Nathan turned to her, his tone softening. "It must be hard, doing all of this on your own." Emily looked away, her gaze focusing on the horizon, where Sophie was playing with an old ball. "Someone has to," My parents put everything they had into this place. After they were gone, I couldn't imagine abandoning it. It's our home, the only one Sophie has ever known. Let's play a game for those who only read the comments. Type hamburger in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now back to the story. Nathan felt a pang in his chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Sophie called out from near the house. "Emily, Nathan, come see this." Emily quickly turned and walked toward Sophie, with Nathan following close behind. When they got closer, Sophie pointed to a delicate blue butterfly resting on a flower in the garden. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sophie whispered. Nathan smiled, sitting down beside her. "The most beautiful I've ever seen." Emily stood behind them, watching the scene. There was something about the way Nathan spoke to Sophie, with patience and kindness that stirred something in her. Emily had always been the only source of support in her sister's life, and now, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. But a voice in her mind kept screaming, "Who is he really? Why is he here?" That evening, Sophie was still animatedly talking about the blue butterfly, while Nathan listened attentively to every word. Emily spoke little, choosing instead to observe. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt something new, something she didn't know how to handle: trust. After Sophie went to bed, Nathan stayed alone on the cabin's porch, gazing at the starry sky. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Emily approaching, holding 2 steaming mugs. "I thought you might like some tea," she said, handing him one of the mugs. "Thank you," Nathan replied, taking it with a smile and feeling its warmth in his hands. She sat beside him on the porch steps, the silence broken only by the sound of crickets and the wind rustling through the trees. "You've never told me why you came here," Emily said, breaking the silence without looking directly at him. Nathan hesitated. He could feel the weight of his lie growing heavier by the day. "I just needed a break from city life. Sometimes you get so caught up in the rush that you forget what really matters." Emily nodded slowly. "You sound like someone who knows what they've lost." Nathan looked at her, catching the soft glow in her eyes under the moonlight. For a moment, he almost told her the truth, but he swallowed the words. "Maybe I'm trying to figure it out." Emily didn't press further. Instead, she took a sip of her tea and stayed silent beside him. For some reason, that silence seemed to say more than words ever could. When Nathan returned to the cabin, he lay on the bed and stared at the dark ceiling. Emily's voice echoed in his mind. He had started this journey with a clear goal: to earn her trust and convince her to sell the farm. But now things were changing. Emily wasn't just a stubborn woman refusing to budge. She was strong, dedicated, and carried an unwavering love for the place her parents had built. And Sophie reminded him of a part of himself he had buried long ago. Nathan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, he wondered if he was ready to destroy all of that. Far away, Emily couldn't sleep either. Lying next to Sophie, she thought about Nathan. Something about him intrigued her, scared her. Because, even against her will, he was making her want to believe in someone again. But she couldn't forget. No one shows up without a reason. And Emily Parker was determined to find out what Nathan Miller was hiding. The day began under a cloudy sky, with the wind blowing harder than usual, rustling the trees around the farm. Nathan woke up with the sense that the day would be different. He didn't know why, but something unspoken hung in the air. Stepping out of the cabin, he saw Emily stacking logs beside the barn. She paused for a moment, resting her hand on her knee, and cast him a quick glance. "I thought you'd sleep in today." "And miss the chance to impress the boss?" "Not a chance." Emily chuckled softly but didn't reply. Nathan walked over and began stacking the logs without waiting for an invitation. "You don't have to do that," Emily muttered, though her tone lacked firmness. "I don't have to, but I want to," Nathan replied simply. They worked side by side in silence for a few minutes until Emily finally spoke. "I was thinking about heading into town today. I need to pick up some medicine for Sophie and a few new tools." Nathan stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "Mind if I come with you?" Emily glanced at him briefly, surprised. "That's not necessary. It's just an hour's drive." "I know, but I'm trying to stay useful. Besides, I can help carry everything." Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Fine. But Don't think that gives you the right to pick the music on the radio. Nathan grinned. Deal. The drive to town was peaceful. The dirt road eventually gave way to a small highway, and the silence between them felt comfortable. Emily kept her eyes on the road, while Nathan watched the scenery outside. Sprawling green fields, trees, and small houses scattered here and there. It was such a stark contrast to his life at the resort, where everything was planned and perfect. "How's Sophie doing?" Nathan asked, breaking the silence. "She has good days and bad days," Emily replied, keeping her focus on the road. "The problem is that the medicine is expensive, and so are the doctor's visits." Nathan noticed the tension in her voice. "And you handle all of this by yourself?" "Yes," Emily answered quickly, as though she wanted to end the conversation. Nathan didn't push further, but her words echoed in his mind. He already knew Emily was strong, but every day he discovered just how much weight she carried. When they reached town, Emily parked the truck in front of a small pharmacy. Nathan got out with her and, without being asked, helped carry the bags filled with medicine and other essentials. "You really didn't have to come," she said, as she organized everything in the back of the truck. "I know, but there's nowhere else I'd rather be." Emily stared at him for a moment, surprised by his response. The sincerity in his voice completely disarmed her, and she turned away, shutting the tailgate. "We need to stop by the hardware store next." Nathan just nodded, smiling. On the way back to the farm, the cloudy sky darkened further. The wind picked up, carrying light raindrops that pattered against the truck's windshield. "Looks like a storm's coming," Nathan commented. "Yeah, it's going to be a rough night." The sound of the rain grew louder, and by the time they arrived, it was pouring. Emily quickly got out, carrying the bags inside while Nathan followed close behind. "Sophie!" Emily called as she placed the medicine on the kitchen table. "Are you okay?" "I'm here." Sophie's voice came from the living room. She was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain through the window. "Looks like the storm is here to stay," Nathan remarked, glancing outside as the rain hammered against the roof and the wind bent the trees. Emily sighed, taking off her wet jacket. "I'll light the wood stove. If the storm gets worse, we might lose power." Nathan watched as Emily moved around the kitchen with ease. He had never seen anyone so independent, so resilient. "Need any help?" he asked. "You can help Sophie set the table," she replied without looking at him. Nathan went to the living room where Sophie smiled at him, still clutching her blanket. "Nathan, will you tell us a story tonight?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "A story?" "Emily always tells me stories on stormy nights, but I already know all of hers." Nathan chuckled softly and sat down on the couch beside her. "All right, I'll think of a good one to tell, but only if you promise to finish all your dinner." "I promise," Sophie said eagerly. Hours later, the storm grew even more intense. The sound of the wind was almost frightening, but inside the house the atmosphere was warm and cozy. The wood stove radiated heat, and Emily had prepared a simple but delicious soup. After dinner, they gathered in the living room, with Sophie sitting between Nathan and Emily. "So, what story are you going to tell us?" Sophie asked, looking at Nathan expectantly. Nathan thought for a moment before beginning. "When I was a child, my father used to tell me about a traveler searching for something he didn't even know he had lost. He walked through villages, crossed rivers, climbed mountains, but he never found what he was looking for." Sophie listened intently, her wide eyes filled with wonder. Until one day, he arrived at a small, simple place where the people treated him like family. For the first time, he felt at peace. He realized he didn't need great treasures or shining cities. Everything he had been searching for had always been right there. A home. When Nathan finished the story, silence fell over the room. Sophie smiled, snuggling deeper into her blanket. "I liked that story," she said softly. Emily, who had been silent the whole time, looked at Nathan with an expression he couldn't quite read. "It's just a story," he said, almost as if trying to justify himself. "Maybe," Emily replied gently before standing up. "Come on, Sophie. Time for bed." Sophie protested but obeyed, saying goodnight to Nathan before heading upstairs. Nathan remained alone in the living room for a few moments, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. When Emily returned, she paused in the doorway watching him. "Thanks for helping today." Sophie really enjoyed the story. "She's an incredible kid." Nathan said, glancing at the staircase where Sophie had disappeared. And you're incredible too, you know? Emily looked surprised, and for a second, she didn't know how to respond. I don't know what you mean. I mean you, Nathan said, meeting her gaze. What you do for Sophie, the way you take care of this place, not just anyone could do that. She looked away, uncomfortable with the compliment. I just do what needs to be done. Not everyone would. Emily didn't reply, simply nodding before turning toward the kitchen. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Emily. When she disappeared down the hallway, Nathan let out a long sigh, running his hands through his hair. He knew he was losing his way. Every moment he spent here, every one of Sophie's smiles, every glance from Emily, pulled him further from his original plan. Outside, the storm raged as if warning him. The lie he had built was becoming too heavy, and Nathan Montgomery knew time was running out. The next morning arrived as though the storm had never happened. The sky was clear, the air fresh, and the sound of birds echoed among the trees. Life on the farm seemed to return to its usual rhythm, but something between Nathan and Emily had changed. The silence between them felt heavier, as if both were avoiding acknowledging what was growing between them. Nathan was in the barn, organizing the last of the tools, when he heard light footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Sophie with a basket in her hands. Emily asked me to bring this to you. They're new seeds for planting. Nathan smiled and took the basket. Thanks, Sophie. I'll take them to her right now. He gently patted the top of her head and walked across the farm, admiring the simple beauty of the place. More and more, he felt like he belonged there, a feeling that scared him. Emily was kneeling among the crops, her face sweaty and strands of hair sticking to her forehead. When Nathan arrived, she looked up and gave him a faint smile. Working hard? He asked, setting the basket down beside her. Always. There's no rest here, Emily replied, grabbing a handful of seeds and spreading them. Nathan crouched beside her, taking a handful of seeds as well. Let me help. She glanced at him, as if she wanted to say something but held back. His presence already felt like part of her daily routine, though she didn't want to admit she liked it. I didn't know millionaires knew how to plant, she said with a hint of teasing. Nathan froze for a moment, but quickly masked it with a smile. What was that? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. I'm kidding. Your hands are too callous to be a city man, Emily said, laughing. I just don't understand what you're really doing here, Nathan. He swallowed hard. That question was becoming harder and harder to answer. Maybe I need a place like this, just as much as you do. She paused, looking into his eyes. There was something in his expression that made her believe him, even if only for a moment. Later in the afternoon, Emily left to visit a neighboring village to sort out an issue with a supplier. Nathan was left in charge of taking care of Sophie and handling the lighter chores. Want to feed the chickens? Nathan suggested. Let's do it, Sophie replied enthusiastically. They spent the afternoon laughing and playing. Despite her fragile health, Sophie ran around the yard with an energy that made Nathan smile. She reminded him of times he had long forgotten, times when the world was simpler and small things brought true joy. Until one day, he arrived at a small and simple place where the people treated him like family. For the first time, he felt at peace. He realized he didn't need great treasures or glittering cities. Everything he had been searching for had always been there, a home. When Nathan and Sophie returned to the porch, she ran inside to grab her coloring book, leaving him alone. Nathan used the moment to look around, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace. But then, something caught his eye. On a table by the door was a pile of letters and documents. Among them was an envelope stamped with the Montgomery Holdings logo. Nathan froze, his heart racing. Why were those papers here? He stepped closer and picked up the envelope, recognizing it immediately. It was one of the offer contracts his team had sent. Before he could think of what to do, he heard footsteps behind him. Emily was standing in the doorway, holding a bag, her face pale as she noticed what he was holding. What are you doing? Her voice was sharp and incredulous. Nathan turned quickly, dropping the envelope as if it had burned his hands. Emily, I can explain. Explain what? She stepped closer, her eyes filling with suspicion. What is a document from Montgomery Holdings doing in my house? Nathan took a deep breath, scrambling for the right words, but every second of silence only made things worse. I wanted to tell you earlier, but Emily stepped back as if he were a stranger. No, this can't be. Her voice trembled. You work for them? Nathan lowered his head for a moment, knowing he couldn't hide the truth any longer. When he looked up again, his expression was filled with pain and regret. Emily, I am them. My name isn't Nathan Miller. I'm Nathan Montgomery. Time seemed to stop. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock, as if she'd been punched in the chest. No, she whispered, taking another step back. You're joking. All this time, you've been lying? At first, yes, Nathan admitted. I came here because I needed to convince you to sell the farm. I thought that if I got to know you, I could make you change your mind. Convince me? She spat the word with disgust. You lied, deceived me, came into my home, pretended to be someone you're not. I know, and I'm sorry. Nathan stepped closer, but Emily raised a hand to stop him. Don't touch me. Her voice was louder now, trembling with anger. Do you think this is a game? That you can use my sister, my home, my memories as pieces on a chessboard? It's not like that, Nathan pleaded. Emily, please listen to me. What started as a plan changed. I changed. Changed? Emily laughed bitterly, tears welling up in her eyes. You're a liar, a manipulator. I don't want the farm anymore, Nathan said desperately. I don't want to take anything from you, and I don't want to hear your voice anymore, Emily said firmly. Get out of my house. Now. Emily. Now. Nathan stood there for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. He looked at her, searching for a trace of forgiveness, but all he saw was pain in her eyes. Finally, he stepped back. I'll leave, but I never wanted to hurt you. Emily didn't reply. She just stood there, watching as he walked to the cabin, gathered his few belongings, and left. Sophie, who had quietly come downstairs, saw everything from afar, tears streaming down her face. Emily? Why is he leaving? Emily turned slowly, wiping her face quickly. He never should have been here, Sophie. Sophie looked out the window, watching as Nathan Montgomery, disappeared down the road, and her heart ached. Hours later, the house was silent. Emily sat alone in the kitchen, her face buried in her hands. She felt anger, pain, betrayal, but also an emptiness she couldn't ignore. A part of her wanted to believe Nathan had been sincere, but how could she? Everything had been based on a lie. Across town, Nathan drove back to the resort, his face somber and his heart heavy. He had achieved everything he'd ever wanted in life: success, power, money. But for the first time, he felt like the poorest man in the world. Night fell over the Blue Horizon Resort. But for Nathan Montgomery, there was no rest. Sitting in his expansive meeting room, he stared out the window at the horizon, where the resort's lights sparkled like stars. It was ironic. Everything he had built, what he thought was his greatest achievement, now felt meaningless. In the center of the table, a stack of contracts awaited his signature. Documents that would launch the resort's expansion, destroying Emily Parker's farm in the process. He had gotten what he wanted. Everything was within his grasp. So why did he feel so empty? Mr. Montgomery, the investors are waiting. David's voice broke through his thoughts. Tell them I'm on my way, Nathan replied, his voice hoarse and distant. David hesitated. He had worked with his boss for years, but he had never seen him like this. The man who was always so confident now looked lost, as if carrying a weight he couldn't explain. Sir, is everything all right? David asked cautiously. Nathan didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the table, but in his mind, he could still hear Emily's voice. You lied, deceived me, invaded my home, pretended to be someone you're not. Finally, Nathan stood up, picked up the contracts, and walked toward the room where the investors were waiting. The conference room was packed. Men in suits chatted animatedly about the resort's future. On the presentation screen, the map of the new luxury wing was displayed in detail, including the area that would soon no longer be Emily's farm. Nathan, one of the most influential investors, Richard Hayes, greeted him with a firm handshake. We're eager to hear your final words. This is a golden opportunity. Nathan forced a smile and took his seat at the head of the table. Thank you all for being here. Let's get straight to it. The presentations began. Graphs, numbers, projections. Nathan listened in silence, his mind elsewhere. He remembered Sophie running through the yard with flowers in her hands. He thought of Emily, kneeling in the fields, scattering seeds with determination. He thought of a storm and a room warmed by the presence of a family he never expected to find. When it was his turn to speak, Nathan stood. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. "Gentlemen, this project represents years of planning and a tremendous opportunity for all of us. The expansion will take the Blue Horizon Resort to new heights." He paused, looking at the investors who waited eagerly. The words were ready. All he had to do was say what they wanted to hear, sign the contracts, and seal the deal. But instead, he said, "But I've decided to cancel the expansion." The room erupted in murmurs. Richard Hayes stood up immediately, incredulous. "What? Is this a joke, Nathan?" "No," Nathan replied, his voice steadier now. "It's the right decision." "The right decision?" Richard shot back angrily. "You're about to throw away millions over some whim?" "It's not a whim," Nathan said, meeting his gaze. "There are things money can't buy." The protests continued, but Nathan didn't waver. For the first time in years, he felt he was doing something right, something that truly mattered. He gathered the contracts from the table and tore them, letting the pieces fall to the floor. "The meeting is over." Richard glared at him, his anger obvious. "You'll regret this, Nathan." Nathan didn't reply. He simply left the room, his heart racing and his head held high. Hours later, Nathan drove along the dirt road leading to Emily's farm. The night sky was dark, starless, as if reflecting the storm within him. His heart pounded harder with every mile that brought him closer to the place that, somehow, had become his sanctuary. When he arrived, the dim light in the house suggested Emily was still awake. Nathan stepped out of the car and stood for a moment, staring at the simple home that meant so much to her. Taking a deep breath, he walked to the door and knocked. After a few seconds, Emily opened the door. When she saw him, her expression immediately hardened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold and distant. "I need to talk to you," Nathan said softly. "You've already said enough. Leave." "Emily, please, just hear me out." She hesitated but eventually opened the door just enough to let him inside. Nathan stepped into the living room where he had spent so much time with Sophie and Emily. Now, however, the space felt cold and lifeless. "Speak," Emily said, crossing her arms and keeping her distance. Nathan looked into her eyes, and for a moment he saw the pain he had caused. "I canceled the expansion." Emily blinked, surprised. "What? The resort project? I canceled it." Nathan repeated firmly. "Your home is safe, Emily. I won't bother you anymore." She studied him, trying to determine if this was just another lie. "Why?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "Because you were right," Nathan said, taking a deep breath. "I came here with a plan. I lied. But after getting to know you, after seeing everything you do for Sophie and for this place, I realized that what I was trying to destroy is worth more than any amount of money." Emily didn't say anything. She just stared at him, trying to process his words. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Nathan continued. "I just wanted you to know that I've given up. This place, it's yours. It always has been." Emily looked away, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was still too raw. "And what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now, I leave," Nathan replied with a sad smile. "But before I go, I need you to know that you've changed my life, Emily. You showed me something I had lost a long time ago." He turned and walked toward the door. But before stepping out, he heard her voice. "Nathan," he stopped, turning slowly. "Why did you do it? Why did you really give up?" Nathan looked at her, his voice filled with sincerity. "Because I finally understood that some things are worth protecting, and you taught me that." Emily didn't respond. She just watched as he walked out the door and disappeared into the night. The days passed slowly after Nathan Montgomery's departure. For Emily Parker, the farm seemed quieter than ever. Every corner of the property carried memories she couldn't escape. Nathan fixing the fence, helping in the barn, telling Sophie stories on stormy nights. It all felt like a distant dream, yet impossible to forget. What unsettled her most was that he had really let go. Word had spread in the neighboring village. The Millionaire had canceled the expansion of the Blue Horizon Resort. The farm was safe. Even so, Emily couldn't feel completely relieved. "Emily?" Sophie's soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. The little girl was sitting on the couch with a book in her lap. "Yes, Sophie?" Emily asked distractedly. Is he coming back? Emily took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I don't know, Sophie. I think he did what he needed to do. Sophie lowered her gaze, sadness filling her eyes. He seemed happy here. Why do people leave when they're happy? The question tightened Emily's chest. She knelt in front of her sister, holding Sophie's delicate hands. Sometimes, people need time to figure out what really matters. Sophie nodded, but her face still carried a shadow of sadness. I miss him. Emily gave a soft smile, brushing her sister's hair gently. I know, sweetheart. I miss him too. The next day, Emily was washing vegetables at the kitchen sink, keeping an eye on Sophie playing in the garden. The little girl was sitting on the grass, carefully weaving a crown from the daisies she had picked earlier. Emily, look what I made, Sophie shouted, holding up the uneven crown with a beaming smile. It's beautiful, Sophie, Emily replied, smiling as she dried her hands on her apron. Emily stood there for a moment, watching her sister lovingly. It was such a joy to see her happy. Despite her fragile health, Sophie always found a way to smile, as if her joy could conquer any hardship. But the peace of that moment didn't last long. Suddenly, Sophie stopped, her expression changing. She clutched her chest and tried to stand, but her legs gave way, and she collapsed. Sophie, Emily screamed, her voice breaking, as she ran to her sister, her heart pounding. When she reached her, Sophie was far too pale and struggling to breathe. Stay with me, sweetheart, Emily whispered, trying to stay calm through her panic. Sophie, look at me. She scooped the girl into her arms and with trembling steps rushed to the truck. Fear consumed her mind, and her hands shook as she placed Sophie in the back seat. Emily drove down the bumpy road as if her sister's life depended on it, because it did. Hold on, Sophie. Please hold on, she murmured, tears threatening to fall. Every mile felt like an eternity. The hospital seemed so far away, and every second stretched unbearably long. She couldn't lose Sophie. At the hospital, the sound of slamming doors and hurried footsteps echoed as Emily rushed through the corridors with Sophie in her arms. Someone help me, please. Her voice trembled with desperation. Nurses appeared and quickly placed the girl on a stretcher. Emily tried to follow, but a doctor gently stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. We'll take care of her, Miss Parker. Please wait here. Emily stood frozen in the corridor, paralyzed by a growing emptiness in her chest. She sank into one of the chairs, her hands covering her face. How much longer would she have to fight alone? Emily. The voice reached her before the person did. When she looked up, Nathan Montgomery was standing in front of her, breathless, as though he had run a marathon. His eyes were filled with worry. What are you doing here? Emily asked, her voice weak. I heard in the village. I came as soon as I could. Nathan replied, kneeling in front of her. How is she? I don't know. Emily's voice cracked. They haven't told me anything yet. She collapsed in the garden, Nathan. She just collapsed. Tears began streaming down her face, and she couldn't hold them back any longer. Nathan hesitated for a moment before firmly taking her hands in his. She's going to be okay, Emily. Sophie is strong, and so are you. What if she's not? Emily whispered, fear spilling over in her words. She's all I have. And you're not alone, Nathan said, his voice low but steady. I'm here now. Emily looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. For the first time in a long while, someone was there, willing to carry the weight with her. Nathan sat beside her, staying silent, holding her hand as the minutes dragged on like hours. When the doctor appeared in the hallway, Emily quickly let go of Nathan's hand and stood up. How is she? She asked, her voice barely audible. Your sister is stable, Miss Parker, the doctor replied. We had to act quickly, but she's out of danger. However, she'll need to continue her treatment regularly and with more care. Her condition is fragile. Emily closed her eyes and let out a heavy breath. When she opened them, a tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it was one of relief. Can I see her? Yes, but only for a few minutes. She needs to rest. Nathan gave Emily an encouraging smile as she walked toward Sophie's room. He stayed behind in the hallway, watching the door close behind her. 2 days later, Sophie was finally discharged and returned home. Emily carefully helped her settle on the couch, tucking a soft blanket around her. Despite her weakness, Sophie smiled. I'm home, Emily. Her voice was small but happy. Yes, my love. You're home? Emily replied, kissing her forehead gently. As Sophie drifted off to sleep, Emily stepped outside to the porch. The cold wind tousled her hair, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon as the weight of responsibility bore down on her shoulders again. She knew this couldn't go on. Sophie needed more than she could provide. That was when she heard the sound of an engine approaching. Looking up, she saw a truck pulling up near the fence. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Nathan climbing out. But he wasn't alone. Behind the truck was a gleaming white trailer with a medical symbol painted on the side. Nathan walked toward the porch, his hands in his pockets and a determined look on his face. "What's this?" Emily asked, startled. "It's for you. And for Sophie," Nathan said, pointing to the trailer. "It's a portable medical center. It has all the medication and equipment she needs for her treatment." Emily stood frozen, staring at him, unable to find the words. "Why?" she finally whispered. Nathan took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. "Because you're important to me." She blinked, surprised, as he continued. "Emily, when I came here, all I wanted was your farm. I lied, I deceived you, and I know I was wrong. But the time I spent with you and Sophie changed everything. You showed me what really matters. I fell in love with you, Emily. With your strength, with the way you fight for Sophie and for this place. And I love Sophie. I never thought I could feel this way, but I do." Emily let out a quiet sob, tears welling in her eyes again. "Nathan, I'm not saying this expecting you to trust me right now," he said, smiling a little nervously. "But I want to prove that I'm here for you. I want to be someone you can rely on." Emily stood in silence for a moment, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, she stepped closer and hugged him. Nathan was surprised but gently wrapped his arms around her, as if holding something too precious to let go. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Always," Nathan replied, holding her a little tighter. From inside the house, Sophie watched through the window with a small smile. Even though she didn't fully understand, she knew something good was happening. In the days that followed, the medical trailer became a symbol of hope. A doctor began visiting the farm regularly, and Sophie started receiving the care she needed. Nathan remained present, working on the farm, helping Emily, and playing with Sophie. He was no longer a stranger. He had become part of their home. And Emily, though she didn't say it out loud, knew her heart was beginning to change. Let's play a game for those who only read the comments. Type hot dog in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. Now back to the story. One afternoon, as they watched Sophie running through the field, Nathan took Emily's hand and smiled. "This is what really matters." Emily looked at him, gently squeezing his hand. "Yes, it really is." The days at the farm became more peaceful after the arrival of the medical trailer. Sophie's health had visibly improved, and she was back to running through the fields with a smile that lit up everything around her. Emily Parker didn't know how to express her gratitude. It felt like, after years of struggle, life had finally paused to let her breathe. Nathan Montgomery had become part of the scenery. Every morning he arrived at the farm with a basket of fresh bread or a willingness to help with the repairs Emily had put off. He seemed like a different man. No tailored suits, no calculated demeanor. He was just Nathan, someone ready to help and increasingly to stay. That afternoon, the sun painted the sky golden as Emily watered the garden. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wet soil and freshly cut grass. Then she heard Nathan's footsteps approaching. He came from the barn, carrying a bucket full of tools, his sleeves rolled up and his face glistening with sweat. "Hard at work?" he asked, a crooked smile on his face. Emily looked up and smirked, spraying a light stream of water at his feet with the hose. "More than you, apparently." Nathan feigned surprise, setting the bucket down. "Are you suggesting I'm lazy?" "I spent hours fixing that barn door." "More like hours arguing with it," Emily replied, chuckling softly. "It's stubborn, like someone I know," Nathan countered, smiling as he stepped closer. Emily rolled her eyes, but the smile remained on her lips. For a moment she stopped and watched him. Nathan was different, lighter, simpler. The way he fit into the farm, as if he'd always belonged there, made her wonder how someone like him had become such a big part of their lives so quickly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Nathan asked, tilting his head playfully. Emily quickly looked away, resuming her work with the hose. "Nothing. I was just thinking you might actually be cut out for farm life." Was that a compliment? He teased, stepping a little closer. Because if it was, I'd like it on record. Don't get cocky, Nathan. Too late for that, he said, taking another step forward. Before Emily could react, he grabbed the hose from her hands. With a swift motion, he aimed the stream of water at her. Nathan! Emily shrieked, jumping back as water splashed her face and apron. Now we're even, he said, laughing loudly. Without hesitation, Emily lunged to grab the hose back. In the commotion, they both tripped, and amidst the chaos, Nathan managed to turn off the water. They stayed there, breathless and laughing, until Emily realized how close they were. Her heart raced as she looked into his eyes. Nathan's smile faded slightly, his gaze softening. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. He reached up and gently brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. You're beautiful when you smile like that, he said softly, almost in a whisper. Emily felt her cheeks flush, but didn't pull away. For months, she had resisted, building walls around her heart. But in that moment, those walls felt too small to contain what she was feeling. I never thought I'd be here with you, she admitted quietly. Nathan smiled, moving a little closer. And I never thought I'd find something so important in this place. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then slowly leaned in. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. When their lips finally met, the world around them seemed to fade away. There was no sound of crickets or the breeze rustling through the trees. It was just the two of them, connected in a kiss that spoke feelings words couldn't express. When they pulled apart, Emily opened her eyes to find Nathan looking at her with deep emotion. I should have done that a long time ago, he said with a smile, brushing her cheek lightly with his thumb. Emily tried to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she smiled, her heart overflowing with a happiness she hadn't felt in years. Night fell, and the soft glow from the porch light bathed the farm in golden hues. Sophie was already asleep, and Emily sat on the steps, gazing at the stars. Nathan appeared with 2 steaming mugs of tea and sat down beside her. Chamomile tea, he said, handing her one of the mugs. They say it helps calm the heart. Thank you, Emily said, smiling as she took the mug and looked up at the starry sky. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying the tranquility of the night. Finally, Nathan set his mug aside and turned to her. Emily, can I ask you something? She looked at him, surprised by the serious tone in his voice. Of course. Nathan took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I know I came into your life the wrong way, and I know I hurt you. But in these past months, you and Sophie have completely changed my life. You've shown me what truly matters. He took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. I want to be here for you. I want to be someone you can always count on. Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. Nathan, let me be part of your life, he continued, gazing deeply into her eyes. Let me take care of you and Sophie. I'm in love with you, Emily. I want you to be my girlfriend. Emily felt a lump in her throat, tears threatening to fall. She stayed silent for a moment, trying to find the right words. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice trembling. Just say yes, Nathan said with a soft smile. She looked at him, seeing in his eyes a truth she couldn't deny. He was here for her sister, for the farm they loved so much. For the first time, Emily didn't feel afraid to open her heart. Yes, she finally said, a shy smile appearing on her lips. I want to try. Nathan beamed, his smile as bright as the sun. He pulled Emily closer and kissed her again tenderly, as if promising never to let her go. At that moment, under a sky full of stars and a gentle breeze sweeping across the farm, Emily realized that maybe the future could be different. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. And there, beside Nathan, she knew she had found more than an ally. She had found someone willing to stay. The days at the farm became chapters in a story Emily never thought she'd live. Since the moment Nathan had confessed his feelings, everything seemed different. He was always there, a ready smile, a helping hand, or a gaze that seemed to pierce through the walls Emily had spent years building. No matter the day or the situation, Nathan always found a way to surprise her. One sunny morning, Emily stepped onto the porch to find a small vase of blue flowers carefully placed on the step. A handwritten note was tucked into the vase. For you who brought color to my life. She smiled, feeling her heart melt. Another afternoon, while fixing a fence at the back of the farm, she heard the faint sound of a violin. Frowning, she removed her gloves and followed the sound to the front of the house. There was Nathan, standing by his truck, holding what looked like a brand new violin. He smiled sheepishly as he played a sweet, hesitant melody. "Don't judge me," he said, laughing as he saw her expression. "I've been practicing all week. I'm no maestro, but this is my way of saying I'm thinking of you." Emily laughed, putting her hands on her hips. "That's the craziest thing you've ever done." "It's not," he said, lowering the violin. "The craziest thing was falling in love with you." She blushed and looked away, but Nathan set the instrument down and walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "And I'd do it all over again." Every day, he proved he was there to stay. If Emily needed help in the barn, Nathan showed up with the tools before she could even ask. If Sophie had a hard day, he found a way to make her smile, whether it was bringing home a box of cupcakes from town or teaching her how to play cards. Nathan had become part of their daily lives, as if he had always belonged there. "You do too much for us," Emily said one evening as they sat together on the porch. "There's no such thing as too much," Nathan replied, looking at her with warmth. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Emily didn't say anything, but the truth was he had won not only her heart but also her trust, something she thought she'd never give to anyone again. The months passed and Sophie's health remained stable. She ran through the fields with a joy Emily had only seen on rare occasions before. The medical trailer had become a symbol of security, something Emily never imagined she'd have. It was on a bright spring afternoon, with the sun shining brilliantly, that Nathan made the most important decision of his life. He spent the day restless, busying himself in the barn, while Emily and Sophie planted new flowers in the garden. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Nathan approached Emily, who was crouched by the flowers. "Emily," she looked up, wiping her forehead. "What is it?" "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. Emily frowned but took his hand. "What are you up to?" "You'll see." He led her through the field, past the fence, and toward the barn. Emily was puzzled when she noticed a path of flower petals scattered across the grass. Small lights hung on strings glowed softly around the barn, gently illuminating the way. When they stepped inside, the barn's interior looked like something out of a dream. Delicate lights hung from the ceiling, candles lit strategic corners, and in the center, a small wooden table was set with a white tablecloth, a vase of flowers, and 2 glasses. "Nathan, what is this?" Emily asked, her voice low with surprise. He smiled and pulled out a chair for her. "Just sit and enjoy." Emily sat down, still unsure of what was happening. Nathan opened a bottle of grape juice and poured it into the 2 glasses before sitting across from her with a gentle smile. "It's beautiful," she murmured, glancing around. "How did you do this?" "With Sophie's help. She's a great accomplice," he replied, making her laugh. They ate together, talking and laughing as they always did. But Emily sensed something was different. There was an emotion in Nathan's eyes she couldn't quite decipher. When they finished, he stood and extended his hand to her. "Come here." "What else have you planned?" she asked, smiling as she took his hand. He led her to the center of the barn, where the floor was covered with more petals. Then he knelt down slowly and pulled something from his pocket. Emily held her breath as she saw a small blue box open, revealing a simple, delicate ring with a sparkling stone at its center. "Emily Parker," Nathan began, his voice full of emotion. "From the day I met you, my life changed. I came here with the wrong intentions, but you showed me what truly matters. You taught me the value of small things and made me realize that love is more important than any other achievement." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed. "You and Sophie are everything I've ever wanted, even without knowing it," he continued, smiling softly. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to be by your side through every moment, good or bad. Emily, will you marry me?" Emily's heart raced. The tears finally fell, but they were tears of joy, something she hadn't felt in so long. "Yes," she whispered, nodding. "Yes, Nathan, I will." Nathan smiled broadly, standing to slip the ring onto her finger. When he pulled her into a tight embrace, Emily laughed through her tears, her chest so full of emotion it felt like it might burst. "I love you," Nathan murmured, resting his forehead against hers. I love you too, Emily replied, her voice thick with emotion. Outside, hiding by the barn window, Sophie watched everything with a wide smile, holding a blue flower in her hands. I knew it would work, she whispered to herself before running back to the house. Months later, the farm was more alive than ever. Flowers were in full bloom, and the green fields looked even more vibrant under the bright sun. The day of Emily and Nathan's wedding arrived, and the ceremony was held right there, in the heart of the farm, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and loved ones. Emily wore a simple yet charming dress, handmade by a local seamstress. Sophie walked ahead of her, scattering flower petals along the path, her smile lighting up everything around her. When Emily reached the makeshift altar where Nathan waited, he looked at her as though it was the first time he'd ever seen her. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she stopped beside him. "And you look nervous," she replied with a smile. They exchanged simple yet heartfelt vows. Emily promised never to carry the weight of the world alone again, and Nathan promised to stand by her side every day as her partner, friend, and husband. When they finally kissed amidst the cheers and tears of those watching, Sophie shouted loudly, "Long live the bride and groom." The day turned into a celebration. There was music, simple food, laughter, and dancing under the stars. Emily and Nathan danced together in the middle of the field, illuminated by the lights Nathan had hung in the barn months before. "Is this a dream?" Emily whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "No," Nathan replied, holding her closer. "This is the life we deserve." And there, among the stars and the scent of fresh flowers, Emily knew that, for the first time, she was truly happy. Do you think Emily was right to forgive Nathan? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to follow all our stories, and check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.